Hello and welcome back to the Coin Stories podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Brunell, and I'm talking to leading voices in Bitcoin and macroeconomics about their origin stories, Bitcoin headlines and news topics, and this movement to fix the world by fixing the money. This podcast does not provide financial advice. Before I share this week's episode, here are some messages from my sponsors who make this show possible. First of all, are you ready for Bitcoin 2023? I certainly am. This year's Bitcoin conference was absolutely amazing. I got to spend a week in Miami with tens of thousands of Bitcoiners from around the world, and I'm so grateful that I had the chance to anchor Bitcoin Magazine's live desk and MC the main stage. If you missed the event, you can catch all 3 days of incredible Bitcoin content over on Bitcoin Magazine's YouTube channel. And also, it's never too early to start making plans to attend the next conference. Bitcoin 2023 tickets are already available and super early bird rates do not last long. So you can visit b.tc/conference/2023 and secure your pass before prices increase. This show is also powered by OKCoin, my favorite place to DCA without the crazy fees. OKCoin recently launched an amazing initiative called Crypto for All, which is aimed at democratizing knowledge and access to Bitcoin. OKCoin is one of the fastest growing and most secure global cryptocurrency exchanges that serves all your needs for Bitcoin and is committed to investing in educational content, funding crypto developers and entrepreneurs from underrepresented groups, and helping more diverse talent work on crypto ecosystem projects and careers. OKCoin has actually contributed more than $1 million to Bitcoin core devs and counting, has one of the most active Lightning nodes, and recently launched Sats mode. To open an account and start stacking, head to okcoin.com/Natalie and get $50 in Bitcoin when you sign up. All right, well, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time. It's really an honor to talk to you. You have so many fans. So thanks for doing this podcast.
No problem.
Let's start at the very beginning. I want to hear a little bit more about you. I had the chance to talk to you when we were anchoring the Bitcoin Magazine live desk at the Bitcoin conference. And it was really interesting because we have similar backgrounds, kind of humble beginnings, humble roots. So I read that you're from Massachusetts, right? Tell me a little bit about your young life and your family growing up.
Yeah, so I grew up like 20 minutes north of Boston, just a suburb, very traditional, I guess, upbringing, small town, middle-class town. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a lawyer and just grew up, played sports growing up, and it was pretty traditional. So I'm still like really good friends with the guys I grew up with, stay in touch with them. So I went from there to University of Michigan. That's where I went to college. My sister was a senior when I was a freshman. So like I visited it growing up, like, oh, this place is great. And then I moved back to Boston after I graduated. So that's like the real abbreviated version, but that's it.
Well, you mentioned middle class. So when you were growing up, did you feel like things were comfortable financially? Did you think about money? Did you want to be, this, rich guy someday?
Yeah, no, I would say it was comfortable. I never had to like want for anything. It wasn't now, I'm in the Hamptons right now. I had a place in the Nantucket, the Hamptons. Like I never was there. Like my parents, like we weren't doing like exotic stuff. My mom, if we were taking vacation, she was doing like, she tried to like trick a timeshare person, so you get like a free thing, but then you go look at the timeshare. But it was middle class. I never was like, oh my God, we're hurting for money. But I was never, oh my God, I can do whatever I want. It was really, truly, I would say, a very middle class upbringing.
So what did you want to be?
Like, I mean, they look like, my parents look like dirt poor now compared to me, but it's like middle class,
Well, and we'll talk about this in a little, but I know that you had that same desire to want to help them and make sure that they're financially secure, which is something that drives me as well. But we'll get to that. So what did you want to be when you grew up, and what did you study in school? Because there was some journalism there, right?
No, there was not much journalism actually. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like I didn't think that far in advance, I would say, for what I wanted to do in college. I applied to Michigan and I originally didn't get in. They wrote back a letter. They're like, no, I applied to a liberal arts program. And in the rejection letter, it's like, we actually, though, think you'd be a great nurse for some reason, which is Yeah, wildly inaccurate because I still pass out when I give blood. Like I'm not a blood guy. There may have been maybe a male like nurse shortage in the country at the time, so they're trying to get more male nurses. Whatever the case may be. So I talked to my sister who was at the school, and I'm like, if I go as a nursing for a semester, can I just transfer back into where I got denied? She's like, yeah, once you're in the school, you can move around whatever you want. So
Oh.
I went as a nurse and then transferred out. During the course of my education there, the liberal arts, you needed a language. You had to pass languages, like, and I couldn't. I just can't speak another language. I don't know, something in my brain must not have fully developed, but I cannot pass any language. So I transferred again within the school from the liberal arts to education, because in the education school, you didn't need the language requirement. So I'm like, okay, I kind of snake my way around. That's how I'll graduate. So
Wow.
I graduated Michigan with an education degree, but never any intention really of teaching.
Oh, well, I thought that you started that newsletter. That wasn't during college.
No, Barstool Sports. You're talking
Yeah.
about Barstool
Yeah.
Sports. Yeah. No, that was after. That was a
Oh,
full-time
okay.
job, but that had nothing to do with journalism. That was
Okay.
strictly business. Like
Okay.
I was doing that as a business venture that I thought could work, but I was never intending myself to be a writer or anything like that.
Got it. Okay. So tell me, you graduated and then what happened next? You mentioned you moved back to the East
Yeah.
Coast.
So the economy was really good when I graduated. It's kind of like the dot-com boom. I graduated in 99. So economy's flying. I got a sales job at a company called Yankee Group. It was like research and consulting, essentially. They would write, like profile papers on wireless technology or whatever, and then they'd sell it. We'd sell it to the different companies. Hey, you can use this as third-party research. So I sold access to basically analysts is what I did that for about 5 years. That's really my only job besides Barstool. I always
Wow.
knew I wanted to try my own thing. So 5 or 6 years after that, I started Barstool Sports.
Okay, so tell me all about that because I know so many people are probably curious. They've read your Wikipedia page and that only goes so far. So, what was the thought process behind it and how did it grow from this like tiny seed into this massive media empire, I would say?
Sure. So, well, one thing I realized doing sales, I was a sales guy calling, picking up. Literally, it was an era like I put the yellow pages in front of you and kind of call type thing. I knew I didn't want to do sales my whole life. I just prior said the economy was booming when I started. Well, it turned by the end of my sales career. And I saw people who were at Yankee Group for 2 decades walk in and like get fired, basically. Like things were going crazy.
Mhm.
I always knew I wanted to try my own thing. And I hated waking up for my sales job. Like I hated it. It was I couldn't wait for Friday. I dreaded Monday. And it's like really I want to try something my own or something that I liked, enjoyed. I always gambled. I was fascinated by it. I liked doing it. So I flew out to Las Vegas, interviewed with all sorts of like casinos out there. Like, how do I get involved in this industry? And
Wow.
on the marketing side, or the business side of it. And they almost all said you have to start at like the ground level as like a dealer in the casinos. I'm like, well, I don't. I've been working like a normal job, making okay money for 5 years. I'm not going back to that. Then, again, this is kind of the dot-com. I started calling like offshore sports books. It was illegal at the time, but there was all these casinos that were like based in other countries. And I started talking to them on the phone, be like, what I want to get in on this industry. And they gave the idea if I create a newsletter at the time, they want to get off the internet, believe it or not, because if you
Mhm.
went to like a gambling website, there'd be like fireworks and pop-up ads. It looked like you're getting your credit card stolen if you
Mm.
went online. Like we want to get off the internet and into a physical newspaper. So that's what I did. I created this based on their advice, and I sold probably like a year's worth of advertising before the newspaper launched. So that let me kind of get my feet underneath me, figure out what worked, what didn't. Turned out the gambling slant really did not work for the newspaper. And it morphed much more into a men's lifestyle, men's interest, based in Boston. I would wake up in the morning. I would hand out the newspaper like outside a subway station at like 4 or 5 a.m. Every single day. I'd go back, I'd call for ads, I'd write things, and then go back to the subway stations in the evening, catch the commute coming home, just handing it out to people walking by. I delivered all the papers myself. It was like a 48-hour like paper route, basically. I bought a like Astro van for $800 off Craigslist. And so I did everything. It was soup to nuts. And it's 2004. And it just slowly grew, word of mouth, like 2004 to really, I would say like 2010-ish, just slowly grinding and and growing slowly. Like at one point, I did think I had to get another job. So I took another sales job and I quit first day at lunch. I just like at lunch, I just drove away, never came back. Cause like I can't do two things. Like the Barstool takes every second of my focus and my energy. It just continued to grow. And one day, this is probably the first big turning point. I was handing the newspaper out to a guy, and he took it. He's like, "I love reading this, but I'm moving to New York, and I'm not going to be able to get it because the only way to get it's a physical newspaper. If he's like, I'm a tech guy. If I build you a website, would you put the newspaper on the website?" It's like, yeah,
Oh,
if you want to do it for free, knock yourself out. His name was Ian White. He ended up being the CTO, I think, for Business Insider, which is a company ironically I despise now. But so he was a smart guy and he built it for free. And it became pretty evident right away that the internet was gonna dwarf my newspaper because I didn't have, the cost associated with the print publication and distribution. At the time, if you said like the word blog, people would be like, what is that? I've never heard of that. But that is what early Barstool became, thanks to this fan of ours who moved to New York and wanted to read it. And then it kind of just started growing pretty quickly from there.
wow. Yeah, I was going to ask because even just the early 2000s, I mean, the internet was growing and people started to have Facebook right around that time. And so I was curious how it transitioned from paper to
we predated Facebook,
yeah.
which makes me like sad almost away. But I remember somebody telling me about MySpace. They're like, you have to get on MySpace. I'm like, what is that? So we're late to MySpace. We were late to Facebook to a degree. We've been early to every other social media. And a lot of times I say we're kind of the first new age digital media company because we've been around close to 20 years, but we're before Facebook, before Instagram, before TikTok. And we've been able to understand those technologies, I think, better than a lot of media companies. And it's allowed us to grow pretty quickly. So, that like the newspaper was great without it. But I mean, to give you an idea, when I was selling ads for the newspaper, this is 2004. I kept the newspaper from 2004 to 2011. By I probably like 2008, 9, I made the time frame. I knew the newspaper was outdated, but I couldn't get advertisers to pay me unless I had the tear sheet from the newspaper. They didn't have like their online budget set up yet. It was like that new. So, yeah.
Well, so do you remember the early, so you were writing the articles early on?
Yes.
Or did you have writing? Well,
both. We had both.
Okay. Do you remember just sort of what you wrote about in those early days and why you think it kind of caught on and lit a fire that people resonated with it?
Yeah. So it was a different type of writing. I mean, I remember, and a lot of the articles, some of the articles were mine, some of them weren't. But like and I don't know where it went. We used to have a Barstool Hall of Fame, like our early articles that people still remember. There's maybe our most famous for our longtime fans. It was called State Street Blues. And it was about State Street in Boston. And they offered like they were going through budget cuts and they offered a voluntary like retirement package. And they like greatly underestimated how many, like the entire company took it because they hated their job so much. And a guy wrote all about it, very funny, tongue in cheek manner. I wrote an article like Sales 101, just making fun of like what it's like to be like a salesperson. It could be a guy wrote, he went to like a Playboy party, like, and he wrote about that experience from just being a normal guy getting that invite. It was very relatable is the word that I would use.
Did you have at the time foresight of where you wanted it to go, or were you kind of just day by day, just really enjoying it? You believed in it and you didn't think of like how it could transform, especially with the digital economy?
Yeah, I had no idea. My main thing was I wanted to be a create a living and wake up and not hate what I was doing. I was working 100 times harder than I was when I worked at Yankee Group. Like I didn't take a day off probably for a decade. Like that's no joke. Like 7 days a week, I was working 8 to 10 hours every single day, but I didn't hate it. It was like for myself, I was building something for myself. But no, if I was making 60 grand a year and like I woke up and I was like happy, I would be happy. I never dreamed that it was going to turn into what it did. And to be honest, I mean, how could you? There are a lot of things broke exactly the way I needed it to break for us to be who we are.
What was the turning point? Like, how did it grow? Can you describe, like, from the beginning, you probably didn't make that much money, and then you started to make maybe six figures at some point, and then like, how did it turn into what it is today?
Yeah. So it was just a consistent grind early. And we had some good writers. It was just sticking with it. And it was just a slow, gradual like uptick. It probably, I mean, I remember my first $20,000 ad deal like that I got. Like I remember like framing like the check being like, holy shit, we actually got a $20,000 deal. And so from 2004 to 2010, it's growing. And then I'd say the first moment we had never been outside of downtown Boston ever. Like everything was concentrated in the city, but we had the website and I was like, I got to see what we're like outside of Boston. So we put together a music tour. It was 8 stops, 10 stops, called it Stoolapalooza. Got a local guy named Stam Adams, who was like a young kid doing music. And we went on the road, and that was probably the moment I was like, whoa, I have something way bigger than I thought. Like we showed up at these, it was like UMass, URI, Quinnipiac, Worcester, like in Mass. And I remember UMass, which is the college, we were just going to little like bars or frats to do this event. And the university called me. Their like basketball arena is called the Mullins Center. It's just a full blown like arena. And they said, they're like, we're getting all these calls for this concert and we don't know what they're talking about. Like, what is it? I'm like, oh, we're just going to like a bar down the street. And they're like, well, would you ever do it at our arena? I'm like, I don't think I can afford that. And they created this deal where it was the risk was basically on their end, not mine. And we sold, so they just did the floor of the arena, but we sold 3,000 tickets in a minute. And we showed up and like our signs were in the windows and everywhere we went, it was like that. And that was probably 2010. That was probably when like, whoa, I have something like way bigger than I realized before. It was the internet. Like the internet had spread it a lot faster than I had realized.
I mean, were you a kid that grew up watching, corporate media? And then you're part of this movement of just like content creators and citizen, I guess you don't want to be called a journalist, but like the world is now being taken over with the decentralization of the information. And that's not the way we grew up. Yeah.
So yes, but it was much more on a sports slant, like Boston, and Boston particularly. I'm sure there's other cities. We had journalists, sports reporters who had, and even like talk radio, who had been entrenched as the kings of what they were doing. And they were arrogant. They were closed-minded. They thought their success was 100% because of their talent, as opposed to like, how do you compete versus them? Unless WEEI or the Boston Globe is like, hey, Dave, here's a job. How do you get your information out? Well, the internet totally leveled that playing field. And there's so many quotes from people who dominated Boston about me and others. Oh, they're just guys in their basement. Like, we don't have to worry about them. They're not real. And we swallowed them up. And it was because they were too arrogant to realize what was happening. And we worked 100 times harder than they did. Like the internet is a great equalizer. Like anybody, if you're good enough, you generally will get found on the internet. It takes a little luck, but you create your own destiny. So that was huge. That was huge for us.
Were there any challenges along the way? Because the way that you talk about it, it seems like it was slow and steady, but sure. But it sounds like it just easily unfolded. And, everyone goes through struggles, right? So, and there was the financial crisis, 08, 09. So were there points where you were like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work?
Well, yeah. I mean, in the beginning, when I got the job, it just hadn't. It's like, how long do you want to like basically be struggling, every day on what you're doing? The biggest challenge, again, it wasn't easy. It was 20 years. Like I worked my ass off for it. But the biggest obstacle we had was after that music tour that I just explained. Like, so Sam Adams, I paid him $20,000 for 6 stops came back to me, 6 stops. So not a lot of money. And we made real money. Like it's the first time I cleared probably like, I don't know, 250 grand from the whole concert tour. And I'm like, wow, if I can do this with relative unknown talent, I'm going to go get real talent and I'm going to 4-wall these big venues, meaning I'll pay for it all myself. I'm going to rent the building. I'll do the ticketing. I'll do the talent. I'll do everything. We called the concert tour Back to Stool. So it's like Stoolapalooza Back to Stool. And I paid a lot of money for all of it. And it basically tanked. Like we did the same exact amount of tickets for the talent that I had on this. It was a guy, Mike Posner, who was huge at the time.
Yeah.
Like he had like a Cooler Than Me. The song just came out. Wale, Mac Miller was on it. It was like a legitimate tour. We sold the same amount of tickets with the one guy. What I realized, our crowd was coming for us, not the talent. I thought we were going out of business though when that happened. That was, if I couldn't, I'm like, if I have to pay all these contracts in full, we're done. Like I had basically pushed all my chips back to the middle. And fortunately, I was able to cancel a lot of the concerts and pay like 50%. So we got killed, but we survived. That's as close as we've been to be like out of business.
Wow. Well, to talk a little bit about finances, investing, when you started to make money, how did you save it or invest it? Did you start exploring the stock market? Crypto didn't probably exist then. So
yeah, I didn't save any of it. I just kept reinvesting in everything we did. Whether it be hiring people. We had another concert tour. The third one that we did was called the Barstool Blackout Tour, like an EDM tour, which I thought I was going to retire on in like 10 minutes. So we did a tour prior to EDM really taking off. And so it's basically a rave, for lack of better words. But we paid a DJ $500. He played other people's music. We charged $50 to get in, and we were selling out across the country. Like I remember, there's a New Jersey concert tour called Bamboozle. I think it still happens, and Live Nation called and like, we'll give you 250 grand to close after Bon Jovi. And they thought they were, because Live Nation saw across the country how our tickets were doing, and our tickets are going to sell. They sell it in 30 seconds everywhere.
Jeez.
And I remember being on the call, and they thought they were lowballing us. And their explanation, they're like, I know this isn't a great offer, but so many people are going to hear your music. And I was like, wait, what? They're like, they'll hear your music. I'm like, we have no music. What are you talking about? It's like, we don't have original music. And they didn't get it. They're like, well, why are people buying tickets? I'm like, it's just a party. It's a Barstool party. So, I mean, we were doing 3 shows a week during the height of the Blackout Tour, and I could be clearing 250 grand a night, like a night. We were killing it. What? But as quickly as that came, it disappeared. So I was reinvesting in lights, equipment, trucks. So I probably broke even on the Blackout Tour when it was all said and done, but it did allow us to hire other people. As far as investments, nothing. I remember my parents, I used to got in a fight with them. I say this loosely, they were stealing money from me to put it into Roth savings for me. Because, like, he's going to like basically go bankrupt and he's going to have nothing. So I'd be like, Mom, why are you doing it? It's like, either this is going to work on such a big level, or I'm going to be back at square one anyway. So like, why are you taking like, $1,000 from me a month to put it in an IRA? But no, I wasn't doing anything with stocks investing. And my investment was Barstool. That was my gamble.
Well, so when did you start? Because now people also know you as, a crypto investor. You have Bitcoin. Right. When did all that start?
Really during COVID.
You didn't do a single like investment in a stock or crypto
very
before
little
pandemic.
I bought like Twitter. I remember, I think I had Twitter, and that's about it. But no, I wasn't doing anything. Wow. All my energy was focused on Barstool. Penn National Gaming bought us, or bought 36% of us. That's a gambling company, like a legalized gambling company. And sports was what I was focused on. COVID hit, sports stopped, everything stops. And it was really like, how am I going to create content and be entertaining? So the stock market was still going. So one day I told a guy, I'm like an assistant, I'm like, hey, an assistant of mine, just go get me a bell. Like, go staple a bell to the front of my office. He's like, all right. He went and got a little bell. I showed up and wore a suit the next day. I rang the bell at the beginning of the stock market and I live streamed. I'm like, I'm going to trade. Hey, I'm going to now you can watch me trade. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was buying and selling stocks. Like, give me 1 million of like Shopify, give me like 2 million of, Shake Shack. And I was buying and selling during the course of the day. I'd be like, oh, I'm up like 2 million today. Oh, I'm down 500 grand. And people were watching. It was very real. I was having real emotion because it was really my money. And it instantly, people were just captivated by it. So it's like, all right, I need a name for this. And I just called it DDTG, Davey Day Trader Global. And I did it pretty much throughout COVID. Like, every day I'd wake up at the beginning of the stock market and I'd go live and then go live at the end. And people knew what I had. They followed it. I was moving some stocks, not intentionally, but if they had, like, I knew nothing. So if they had small enough, trading volume, I could move it by just talking about it. What's that show? Billions did like a skit on me about it. Literally, like they had a guy who was sitting at his desk, like just being a loudmouth. That was what I was doing, and it caught on. Like, I got a lot of press around it. Like, I made fun of Warren Buffett. That became like a huge thing. I said I was smarter than him. So that went on, and the Bitcoin thing really started. I was in the Hamptons, staying at a hotel next to the Winklevosses.
Oh.
And I was talking about Bitcoin, and they're like, hey, we'll come over and teach you Bitcoin. I'm like, all right, come over. We turned the video camera on, and their explanation for Bitcoin was just lunacy. Basically, they explained it to me that Elon Musk was going to go to outer space and mine gold from outer space, and it would rain down on Earth, making gold like useless. And that's why Bitcoin. I bought, I think 1 million or something of Bitcoin before they came and sat next to me. And then they sat next to me and I sold it like the second they left. I'm like,
no way.
Yeah, I'm like, this is crazy. I want out of this.
Do you remember what you bought it for?
Yeah, 11,000. But
you sold it.
And then it went crazy. When I say what if you want a time when Bitcoin, like the rush from like 11 up to 60, you can almost coincide it with when I pressed the sell button. Like, it wasn't going that crazy before I bought and sold, and whatever the timing. So Bitcoin people would just always ride me like paper hands. Ha ha ha. Obviously it's come back way down, but what hasn't? So yeah, that was the beginning of my Bitcoin. I rebought it. I bought Bitcoin at 36,000.
Right. This episode is also brought to you by one of my favorite companies in the space, Fold. Fold is the easiest and most fun way to earn Bitcoin on everything you do. So if you're interested in Bitcoin, but you really don't know where to start, Fold is the perfect app. There's a daily wheel that you can spin every day for free, and you can earn Bitcoin, free Satoshis. Seriously, there's no catch. And one of my other favorite things is their card, the Fold debit card. You can actually earn Bitcoin back on every single purchase. So make sure to download the Fold app today. There's a referral link in the description.
I rebought it. I bought Bitcoin at 36,000
right
recent time, which I still have.
And what was that? Like, what was that decision to go back into it? Didn't you mention at the Bitcoin conference, Marty Bent had something to do with this too?
So Marty Bent worked for me. Marty Bent, and I didn't talk to him too much. I guess that's the first time I bought it. Marty Bent was hired at Barstool. I don't know what to do. He was like writing the ad copy or something, but he basically set up a little side office and was trying to basically evangelize everybody to get Bitcoin. Like, his nickname at the office is just Bitcoin Marty. So I did buy Bitcoin. He walked me through it on the little razor, and I have no idea where it is. I think I probably bought 15 to 20 grand worth of it at 7,000 with him. Wow. And I God knows where that is. I have no idea
where it is.
No idea. I have absolutely no idea where that is. So yeah, that was and then we find out Bitcoin Marty's still in the Bitcoin world. I actually had lunch with him, I don't know, a month ago in Miami.
Okay, so what was your decision to buy back in? Like, did you take the time to start to study Bitcoin, start to understand like why all of us are so, why we're such big advocates of it?
So we talked about this a little bit on the panel. I do not necessarily buy into all the reasons that people love it for. I do buy into it's become too big that it's not going anywhere.
Mhm.
Like I am strongly debating buying more at this price point. So it was up to 60 and went back down to 36 is when I bought. I'm like, okay, like it's way off its highs. This is a good time to re-enter. And I do think it's going to be here forever. I don't know about all the other stuff. Now, I think there's a degree of smoke and mirrors with it, but it has become a real commodity and you can use it more and more places.
Mhm.
I don't know why it was started. If I believe all that, I get like letting a government control currency and all that stuff. So I get what people say about it. I don't buy into the people who 99% of the people who say they're in Bitcoin, like to solve world hunger and like humanity and it's this righteous thing. I don't buy that at all. They just want to make money like everybody else. That I guess is one of my biggest things about, like, you look at like a guy like Pump. Give me a break. He's not trying to do anything except put money in his pocket. Like, that's just a fact. So, which is fine. That's great. But the illusion that there's something noble with it, that I don't, everyone's trying to make money, me included.
So a lot of the Bitcoiners, they call out problems within the current system of how it's created this wealth concentration. There's a problem with central banking. And like, I would actually argue that a lot of Bitcoiners are in it for very altruistic reasons. So why don't you believe that?
I fundamentally don't like, I think it's a good argument why to buy Bitcoin, which in turn helps the people who own Bitcoin. That may be true, the arguments, but if all these things were true and you couldn't make money in it, I don't think these people, there's plenty of altruistic causes you can get behind.
What do you think of our current financial system?
I mean, it's always the people in power who have the money. Any system is designed to keep those people having money and power. That honestly was always my biggest, I guess, red flag with Bitcoin. It's like, it's just like whatever regulation comes down. It's like there in no society ever do the people in power who have the most money just willingly be like, yeah, we'll let this new system like level the playing field or change it. So the Bitcoin people will be like, yeah, we're out of reach. We can't be touched. Well, yeah, you can. And we've seen it. Like every day you'll see, well, there may be this new legislation. How are they going to regulate it? So nothing is beyond the reach of legislation, which is one of, I think, the big arguments for Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so are you planning to read more about it, or are you just kind of like, I'm going to see how it goes as an investment, but I'm not really into all of the, the mission, the greater mission at hand, which is to kind of transform the financial system, flip things on its head, create a new incentive program that will hopefully equalize the playing field, which is what a lot of Bitcoiners want to happen.
No, I am not going to do any of that reading. I will be in it. Hopefully it goes more. As you say that,
yeah,
the people who have made a lot of money in Bitcoin are the most extravagant, lavish, over the top, braggadocious money people there is. So, like, level a playing field how? To be driving in their yachts that say Bitcoin with a huge license plate at the back? Like, there's nothing subtle about this Bitcoin millionaire. They throw money around. They're not some humble farmer, not like wearing sandals in a court. They're over the top lavish.
I definitely don't agree with that kind of display, but I believe in the altruistic mission of Bitcoin. So we definitely agree to disagree there.
So what, like, even behind us, there's an $80,000 fucking volcano at the Bitcoin conference. It's like everything is just with Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin is like new money over the top in your, not everybody, but it's a lot.
But what do you think about the idea of a system where, again, no one can control it? There's no government that can expand the supply. Like we have this crazy inflation, which we can or don't have to talk about. And the fact that literally, if you just have a cell phone connection, it's like the internet. We talked about how the internet transformed your business and gave rise to so much potential when it comes to media and content creators and information in general. Well, this is now the internet of money, right? You can access it with your phone and an internet account. You can send $1 billion from one place in the world to another within seconds, have it settle immediately, no third parties. It's allowing for people in developing nations to subvert autocratic and oppressive governments. I mean, doesn't all of that sound like an amazing transformation in terms of a monetary technology?
Yeah. I mean, the way you just described it sounds great. But like to my question, all right, you say you can avoid governments, but what happens when the government just comes in and puts a hand in Bitcoin and be like, well, we're going to regulate this way, that way, and the other way?
Well, so the good thing about Bitcoin is it's already been deemed a digital commodity and a digital form of property. So I think regulation will actually just clarify things and not hurt, but essentially make it so that the crypto space at large has to file disclosures as securities and allow people to know the risks when they're investing in these more centralized tokens, which a lot of them have failed. I know you've suffered some of that loss in some of those investments, but no, I mean, the government, I think again, it's very similar to the internet in the sense that you can't ban the internet. It doesn't have a central point of failure. It has no headquarters. It has no CEO. It has no board of governors. Whereas the other cryptocurrencies, they do have ICOs and people in charge. They can expand the supply. They can, make different rules. They have liquidity issues. Bitcoin's a network. Like it has none of these things. So the government can come in and say things about taxes or this and that, but it could be a disadvantage if they do too much because it could drive people to friendlier jurisdictions. But I think the US is actually embracing the competitive advantage of things like Bitcoin and the mining economy and ecosystem. And I mean, I'm very bullish on it, clearly.
Clearly. Yeah, no, I know that everybody at the desk is.
What was that?
And by the way, I think I do not think it's going anywhere. I am debating buying more. I'm holding it. It's just,
but you're not going to read the Bitcoin standard.
My reasons for why I think it's here to stay is different than yours.
Got it. So you're not going to read the Bitcoin standard?
No, I am not.
What was the crypto token that you got into that, I mean, we were sitting at that desk and people were even asking you about it. Yeah. SafeMoon. What happened with that?
I just saw today I'm listed as like a defendant in like a lawsuit with it, which is nuts. Yeah. So, I listen, I'm greedy like everybody else. And the shit coins were like, some of them were going bananas. You'd hear these stories of how much people are making. I didn't have any of them. I'm like, I'm just going to pick one randomly. And I landed on SafeMoon. I'm not sure why. Before I bought it, I did like a press conference. I was very clear. I'm like, I know nothing about this. You may lose all your money. It may be a scam. I'm buying it. That's pretty much what I said. It's been a disaster. Like, I think I put in 40 grand in it. I don't know. I still have it. It's probably worth, I'll tell you what it's worth right now. But it's been a disaster.
When you're rich, does a $40,000 loss hurt, or you're just like,
that's a drop in the bucket. No, that does not hurt. So it's worth 2,000.
Eek.
Yes. And to be honest, I probably would have put more in, but it was very hard to do it. I had to have people help me to do it. No, 40 grand at this, it's all relative. Everything's relative. No, it doesn't. I mean, listen, I'm down. What am I down on Bitcoin right now? I lost. I bought $1 million at 36, and what's it at? 19. Mm-hmm. So I'm almost down half. I'm almost down like $500,000 on it.
I know.
But if you don't sell, it doesn't count, right?
Do you acknowledge there's a difference between Bitcoin and crypto, or do you think they're all the same?
No, I think they're different.
Okay.
I don't trust it. Like the Dogecoin, the SafeMoon, all that. Bitcoin, the only one that I hear that I don't is people mention Ethereum. But I would not buy anything but Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good to hear.
Yes.
Bitcoiners will be very happy to hear that.
Yeah, no, I've matured. I think Bitcoin's real. I don't know about the others.
All right. Well, what do you think about what's happening in general right now? I mean, as someone who you've sort of benefited from the system, and now you've got this amazing company, you're making great money. You probably want to invest it, right? Because you can't just put it in the bank or you're going to lose money with inflation. So what do you think about everything that's happening and how much money they blasted into the system, and now we have inflation and they're just like allowing equities and everything to drop as they try to fix it?
Well, yeah, it sucks, especially since I own equities. Yeah, as somebody who's it's tough. I do think one of my mottos when I did the stock trading is like stocks always go up. I do believe that. You just have to be willing to bear, I want to advise, don't buy it if you need the money. If you have to be liquid in a month or weeks or 6 months, that's a different story. But if you have money that you can put aside and don't need, I think you'll be fine in the long term. Yeah, inflation, this right now, it's a disaster. But that's like everything's in phases. I mean, you talk to me another year and we may be right back where we were 6 months ago. I don't know.
Do you feel like you're lucky with your company with Barstool Sports because it's almost like an equalizer in and of itself because it's not political one way or another. And I feel like a lot of things in our country you just get dropped in a bucket. You're either this or that, and you can't be anything in between, but you sort of seem to bridge that divide.
Yeah. People on the extreme left and the extreme right probably dislike me equally right about now, which is maybe means I'm doing something right. Like if both the extremes don't care for me. The politics of this country stink. I mean, I've said that a lot. I think the extreme left and the extreme right are both basically wackos and insane people. And I think there's way more similarities between most people than differences. But for some reason, we just consistently harp on the differences. And we've tried, depends who you talk to. A lot of people will be like, Dave is very political. He goes on Fox News. He, is on Tucker Carlson. He interviewed President Trump. Then other people right now, it's like, Roe versus Wade, I said my opinion on that, and people who thought they liked me are now like he's the devil. So it really, I wish there were more people who you didn't know the answer to the question before you asked it based on their political beliefs. That is a problem. I think there's too much just company lines, and it hurts everybody.
So you guys get attacked for being one side or another based on what you guys post?
Yes, pretty much, and it swings. Like I've had people who have been in my corner for a decade straight. And if they don't like what I say on one issue, they're like, oh, you're a fraud. It's like, you just haven't listened to what I've been saying at all, because I'm pretty consistently inconsistent.
It's really crazy. Like the position that we're getting to, and the fact that, well, social media makes it easy, right? To attack, and you're kind of behind a veil. But everyone gets lumped into one category. It's like, you can't have centrist views anymore, or what was once left is now super right, and like vice versa. I don't know. It's just, everything's crazy right now. And I also find like I get both sides when they like what I say, try to like kind of co-opt me. Like they're like, oh, see, he said it, all his followers. It's like, yeah, but the next issue, I may be the opposite side. So it just sucks. I've always hated politics. And I am like somebody who generally believes anybody who would get, it's like, I don't know, have you ever seen the movie Gladiator? Like Russell Crowe, when like the emperor there is telling him like, you got to be the leader of Rome. He's like, no, I don't want that. He's like, that's why you have to be. Like anybody, I have a mistrust of politicians, people who want to be in that power. It's like, why do you want that headache? Why do you like all of it? It's like a normal person, to me, wouldn't want that. But that may be why we have so many issues with politicians. Completely. Well, I was a journalist for 10 years, local and national, and I would cover all these campaigns, all these elections. Everyone just became the same to me. It's like they blame this person, then they get job security, and the problems just get bigger. They spend a bunch of money, and it seems like nothing ever gets fixed. So I became very jaded to politics and the idea that something like Bitcoin could separate money from politics. But you clearly have expressed you think that that's really difficult. That would be difficult to do. It's like a pipe dream to you.
Yeah. It's very hard. It's not so much a Bitcoin thing. It's the willingness to relinquish power. And generally the people who have power have money, whatever that currency or
Mhm.
vehicle is in a society. And they're aware of Bitcoin. I don't think they're just sitting there being like, oh, we're just going to let this, like, as you say, even the playing field. That seems a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, no, there's a famous quote from an Austrian economist who wasn't around. I mean, like when Bitcoin started, he wasn't around, but Bitcoiners like it because it says, the problems essentially won't be fixed until a form of money is introduced that can't be stopped by the government. And I think that might have happened with Bitcoin, but we'll see. I wanted to touch on just the idea of helping your family, because again, that's something that has really been driving me. I'm first generation immigrant. I really want to be able to provide financial security for my family. So what was the point where you realized that you can do that, and why was that important to you? I know you bought your mom a house or something, right?
Yeah. So, it was probably the first time I sold Barstool was 51% of it. I was making like 7 figures beforehand with just myself, which is more than I ever dreamed. And, but I sold it in 2016, 51%. Valuation was 12.5 million. So I got like 5-ish, and then 7 went to like the business. And then we sold it for 450 million. In 2000 and what are we in 20 basically. And that was really it. That's like, okay, I have an insane amount of money that I never dreamed I'd have, and it's all relative. But yeah, I was able to buy my parents a new house. My sister, niece, and nephew, like, take care of them and stuff like that. So yeah, that's been very rewarding, because I went 10 years worrying about money every single day. It's like literally, and it's been a long time since I've had to worry about that. So it is nice, but like everyone else, I always want more. Like, I think that's like a basic human nature.
Is that the case? Like they always say that the more money you have, the more expenses you have, and it just like the ball keeps rolling and you need more.
You get accustomed to a certain lifestyle. Granted, the only thing I'd miss if like you took everything away, it's like something happened and I had to go back to, eating ramen noodles and like living paycheck to paycheck, I think I'd be all right. The one thing that I don't know, flying private. That's it. Flying private, I've become accustomed to, not having to go through TSA and all that. That's like, of all the things that money has given me, I think that would be the only thing I truly like crawl into a hole, like, I can't believe, because that's the one benefit that is so superior to living normally. It's just show up before the plane leaves, walk on, no security. That I would miss. I sound like an absolute douche, but that's what I'd miss.
Now, I'm sure that flying that is great. What's the best thing that you didn't expect about being rich, and what's the hardest or the worst thing?
It's not so much being rich. It's I've become very well known. So,
what's been the best and the hardest part about that?
I can't imagine being like truly, truly famous. But I mean, if I go out now, I have to know, like, it's a scene basically. Like I'm not left alone to, like, which is fine, but it's something that you do have to get used to. Like, if I'm out to dinner with my girlfriend, like, the odds are a couple people are going to come and like try to sit down while we're like eating dinner, which is bananas, but like happens almost every time.
And you don't like that?
Not when I'm eating. No, like
don't do that, guys.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would like that. I think I'm generally very good with all our fans because that's why we're here. But it's just knowing you're not a private person anymore. The best, it's definitely being able to help with like my family and stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you think about the idea of purpose? Like, do you think you're living out your purpose?
No, you're going to be disappointed in this. No, I don't think about purpose.
How come?
I'm just living day to day. It's like I have a view of like, I've been very lucky, but like, what does that mean? Somebody who's lived an awful life in, like, did I do something better than somebody in some third world country who has had every disadvantage ever and never had a chance to succeed? Or is it just random luck and particles come together a certain way? I probably think it's particles come together a certain way. So like I don't think I have a purpose that's something divine. There's too much shit in the world. There's too much good. I think a lot of it's random luck.
Do you think about the idea of legacy? Like, do you want to leave something behind, or are you excited about the idea that like people are going to know forever that you created this?
could care less.
Wow.
Like like I'd like to help dogs. That's a ridiculous thing to say, and probably people, but like if I was done with Barstool, I'd like get a huge farm and like do rescue dogs and stuff like that. I'm not a huge human guy. I think there's so many bad humans. I like dogs more than humans. And maybe if there was causes that came up, like we do a lot with charity, and we have, but they're not. I've never done it because I want people to perceive me or Barstool somewhere. It's like, hey, we can help. And I don't look for like pats on the back, or I almost get weirdly, I don't want to say embarrassed, but it's like the Barstool Fund, which we raised like 40 million for small businesses during COVID. That was like a cause that was near and dear to me because I knew how much work I put in with Barstool. And I couldn't imagine, like, I barely made money for the first 10 years. And if COVID hit after 10 years, what, I'm out with no say? It's like that to me is so unfair. So that's why I started the Barstool Fund and did things like that. But it wasn't like that. That was just to help. We've done tons of charities. We've raised so much money over the course. You know, there was the Boston Marathon bombing. When I was still in Boston, we raised $250,000 for a guy who lost his leg to get a new house. But that, again, Barstool has grown where we're in a position, thankfully, to be able to help with some causes, but they're not like, oh, this could be our legacy. This is like, we can help these people, and then we move on to the next. But I don't think of it as like when I'm gone, they're going to think of that. No.
So do you think you're just going to continue like working with Barstool, or do you have a plan to do something else, create something else? What are, I mean, at this point, when you've created something so successful, you have this big buyout, essentially, what are your goals?
So when Penn bought us, I signed a 5-year deal. So that near term, I'm locked in for a long time. We're coming up on 3 years, and I love gambling. So I'm in a field that I like, but I do get the itch sometimes for other opportunities and look at other stuff. But I don't know. I mean, I'm still so focused on Barstool. Like I'm not not near the end of the tunnel. It still needs like basically all of my attention.
Just as an offshoot, I was super curious about that story of you had this successful podcast, Rise, with the women, right? And they got a massive deal with Spotify. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just because I think that's so impressive and crazy.
Yeah. Call her daddy.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's ironic. And there's a lot of criticisms about me and Barstool out there. One of the more prevalent is we're somehow like sexist and chauvinistic, which I obviously disagree. And people sometimes will be like, well, when Dave says this, it's just an excuse. I don't think it's an excuse, but I think I know we have the two biggest female creators of the digital era. And I think on the verge of the third, Jenna Marbles being one. That's like internet 1.0 YouTube. Alex Cooper with Call Her Daddy. And basically, so what we do, we just hire people and don't tell them what to do. Like we don't direct them. We don't get into their brain. With Alex in particular, I saw her do a sizzle reel for Call Her Daddy.
You just sent it in, right? To you. That's what you mentioned.
No, she didn't send it in. Her ex-boyfriend was a Mets pitcher. So he was a well-known guy, Noah Syndergaard. So I was following her.
Okay.
And I saw it on her Instagram. I'm like, what is this? And then I think we had met once or twice, and I just reached out. I'm like, what is this? She's like, oh, it's a podcast that I'm looking at. It hadn't launched, I don't think, yet. She just had this sizzle reel. So she came in, I met with her, and I was like, who made that? It was super slick. Like it was well done. It was a very flashy, slick, well edited thing. I'm like, who did this? She's like, I did. I'm like, what do you mean you? She's like, I learned how to edit, do all of it. Once she said that, it's like, all right, do you want a job? Do you want to like us basically to put gasoline on it and see what happens? She's like, yeah, I do it with another girl. I didn't know that at the time. So the two of them signed them each to, it was $70,000 a year, 3-year contracts. And it exploded like instantly. Like once it went on our network, she became basically the female Joe Rogan, and it happened quickly. So they did a 3-year deal, some hiccups along the way, major hiccups, to be honest, which is very, it's like a record label is how it is. It's like everyone wants to sign with the record label. And then when the artist becomes huge, they're like, we don't need that record label, and we wish we didn't sign the contract. Right. From the record label perspective, ours, it's like, well, We signed 20 of you young artists, and we need one to hit to carry the entire weight. That's what we do. So yes, you're here for 3 years. Go get your money after. That dispute, I think, is as old as time itself. Athletes, artists, podcasters now. But we were able to work it out with Alex, and she got 3 years, $60 million deal from Spotify.
That is, and it's wild how much money is out there in this like new media world and podcasting. I never thought I'd have a podcast. And it's just wild how much you can make and do with this.
Yeah, I think Spotify, and everything's timing, right? I think Spotify, and I don't know that they still are, they were looking at it like, we want to re-sign Alex. And to her credit, she would have taken a discount to stay with us. She liked everything she was doing with us. We let her do her own thing, but we would have had to play it perfect to like break even with her over the 3 years. Spotify, big company, publicly trade, all that. They didn't care. They're not looking at Alex as a return. They bought Rogan, they bought her, they bought Bill Simmons, his network. They're just purely trying to aggregate numbers and go against Apple Podcasts. So it was a hard thing in that world for us to compete with. Now, whether they're still doing that, I don't know, but she hit it dead ass right timing of like, they're willing to, I don't want to say overpay, but they're going to pay top for premium talent to just get that network huge.
Crazy. Yeah. Amazing. Well, to start to wrap it up, I know a lot of people really look up to you, the business that you created, the media figure that you are, the people that you've helped. What advice do you have for people? Cause it seems like you really, you cut your teeth and you did it small and you started slow, and it worked out because you were super passionate and persistent.
Yeah. Almost my advice is the same criticism. So many people reach out, send emails. Hey, I'm perfect for you guys. I'm this, I'm that. The beauty of the internet is talk is cheap. Like just saying you're good or wanting to, or you'd be the best does nothing. Most of the people we found have been doing it because they're passionate about it. And I can go look, it's like, oh, they've consistently been doing a podcast for like a year straight. They haven't missed one deadline. That's almost as important as being talented. You need them both, but it's as simple as it is. Just do it. Like you don't, like people want to work for Barstool. It's like, what would we give you that you don't already have at your disposal? Like you can go create your own podcast by going to Best Buy, buying the equipment, you're up and going. It's just so easy to create content. And so many people think you somehow need like us or some company to do it. That's not true. So I guess my advice always to people who ask, like, do it, prove it. Like you can create your virtual resume. Like talking about does nothing.
If you could talk to your younger self when you were creating this whole thing, is there anything that you would tell him, or is there anything you would have done differently?
I definitely sold it for far too little the first time. Like I didn't understand anything. Like I never thought I was going to sell Barstool. And I just didn't understand how we were valued and everything like that. It ended up working out, but our valuation at 12.5 million, like what I did, I was running Barstool basically to put money in my pocket. Like every cent we made became mine essentially. So I wasn't looking at multiple of revenue and things like that to establish our valuation. So I remember the negotiation and be like, this company is worth this much. I'm like, what are you talking about? We're 100 times bigger than that company. But I could have tweaked. I could have done anything. I could have made our revenue, sales, whatever I wanted if I was willing to like just break even or do other stuff. So that was a learning experience. That's the one thing. It's like, geez, I really undersold. And still, one of my pet peeves is in like the investment world and startups is how many people like will lose other people's money so easily. Like you'll go get investment and you'll fail 9 times and you hit it on your 10th company and you become insanely rich.
Yeah.
Maybe it shouldn't frustrate me. That's not how I ran my company. My company, you had to make money or you went out of business, and it was my own money. So I always get a kick out of that with people who are these great entrepreneurs. It's like, well, you didn't put any of your money up. Like how hard is that?
No, it's an interesting story because even I've found going off on my own, you start to get offers of people wanting to take a cut to, help you grow, whatnot. You must have had a lot of offers along the way where you said no.
I really didn't. I had a very few offers, and I don't know if it was the content or what it was. the churning guys, which is why, as much as I complain about the price, I do have to remind myself people weren't knocking down my door asking to invest. But it was a guy, Mike Kearns, who was at Yahoo Sports. Then he went to Churnin, and I got a call from him. He's like, we're interested. I just went from Yahoo to Churnin. Would you be open for a conversation? He flew from San Francisco to Boston the next day, sat down, and we always got along. And like I said, it actually almost have to rehear myself talk. Other people were not beating down my door. So maybe the offer was exactly right.
Wow. Amazing. All right. Well, final thoughts. A lot of people that listen to my show are obviously big Bitcoiners. You say that you might purchase some more. I think the market might tumble to even lower prices. So
why?
Why
do you think that? Yeah.
Because I think that they're going to continue to try to hike interest rates. And I think that the economy's slowing. We don't have the unemployment numbers yet. Those are lagging factors. I think that there are credit issues around the world. And I just think that something has to break.
Isn't that the whole point of Bitcoin? Is it supposed to be immune to that?
Well, you're right. But I think in the short term, the problem is it's really, really liquid, very new. A lot of people don't understand it. And it's attached to this greater crypto space that's having these liquidity issues, and they were not properly collateralized. So it's being drained. I mean, everything's tanking, right? There's really no safe haven, but the hope, you're absolutely right, is that it eventually decouples from the broader picture. And it has not been performing that way right now.
I don't want to keep this going, but like one thing that you look at, like a Coinbase, or like there were some of these like RSI, I think, no, not RSI. There was like Riot, RIOT. There's a couple, like, why I never understood why those companies were going on the New York Stock Exchange. It's like, all right, your crypto, your whole complaint is about like fiat US currency, and why are you listing on the stock exchange?
Well, I still think that there's value in owning companies, especially companies that are trying to build the ecosystem. So I understand that. I mean, did you ever think about Barstool Sports going public?
Well, we sort of are. We are.
The umbrella company.
Penn
right?
is, yeah. No, not really, because my brain stinks at that stuff. So it's like the amount of, like, I was pretty much myself.
Yeah.
You know, when it probably would have murdered it in hindsight, but like I have a hard enough time like figuring out my own like insurance. Like, I'm gonna go public with Barstool just was not a concern. No.
All right. Well, final words for the people out there who are your big fans, but they're hoping that you are more bullish on Bitcoin someday.
I am bullish, just not for the same reasons. I was planning on buying more until you just told me to wait. So like what? So what is your
financial advice?
What is your price point?
I think that it could come down to the low teens. I do. I think that something's going to break in the system that sparks the threat of a bigger liquidity issue at large. I think they're going to need to step in and print more money. I mean, you've seen the cycles from the .com bubble to the 0809 crisis. It's like the Fed is losing its credibility, but at the end of the day, they have to come in and blow up the bubble because we can't function. Otherwise the whole thing comes crashing down, and they risk not just a recession, but a total deflationary bust. So I think it'll be volatile in the short term. I don't think this is the bottom. I think it's going to come down, and then, but who knows? I don't know. We're just like speculating, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Do you think about this stuff, or you just go about your day?
No. I watch Bitcoin every day.
Okay.
And I keep deciding like when I'm going to re-enter, basically, I'm already in it, but when I'm going to probably buy, I don't know, another 500 grand, another million, something like that.
All right. And what's your next pizza spot?
I actually, right after this, I'm going to a place called the North Fork in the Hamptons. They got like 5 or 6 spots.
Cool. All right. Well, Dave, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime.
Cool. Take care.